I never imagined that opening a birthday gift from my grandson would lead me to rewrite my will. But when I unwrapped that small box and found a note inside saying "Don't come to the rehearsal," something inside me broke. Not shattered, broke open. After 73 years on this earth, 49 years of marriage, and raising 2 children while working full-time as a nurse, I thought I understood what family meant. I thought loyalty was something you earned through decades of sacrifice. I was wrong. That note, written in Michael's familiar handwriting, taught me that sometimes the people you love most are the ones who see your love as weakness. But what Michael didn't know was that his grandmother had one more lesson to teach him about respect, consequences, and what it truly means to be family. My name is Emily Hartford, and for as long as I can remember, family has been the center of my universe. When I married Robert in 1976, we made a promise to each other that our children would always come first. We kept that promise. Through lean years and prosperous ones, through my night shifts at County General Hospital and Robert's long days at the construction company, we put our daughter Sarah and our son David before everything else. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in the ways that mattered. Sunday dinners around our old oak table. Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Birthday parties in our backyard with homemade cake. We built something solid, something I believed would last forever. Sarah was our firstborn, arriving on a snowy February morning in 1978. From the beginning, she was independent, ambitious, driven. David came 3 years later, quieter but equally determined in his own way. I loved them both fiercely, though I'll admit that as they grew, Sarah required more attention. She was always reaching for something just beyond her grasp, always wanting more than we could easily provide. Private art lessons, designer clothes for school, a car for her 16th birthday when we'd planned to wait until she was 18. Robert and I stretched ourselves thin to give her what she wanted, telling ourselves we were investing in her future. When Sarah married Gregory Martinez in 2002, I was happy for her. Gregory came from money, old money, the kind that comes with expectations and country club memberships. He was polite enough, though I always sensed a distance in him, as if he were constantly evaluating whether we measured up to his standards. Sarah seemed transformed by the marriage, or perhaps she simply became more of what she'd always wanted to be. The modest apartment became a house in Brookhaven. The practical Honda became a Mercedes. My daughter, who I'd raised to value substance over appearance, seemed to slip further away from me with each passing year. But then Michael was born in 2004 and everything changed. The moment the nurse placed that tiny red-faced baby in my arms, I felt my heart expand in a way I hadn't experienced since my own children were born. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a pair of blue eyes that seemed to look right into my soul. Sarah had a difficult recovery after the birth, and Gregory was in the middle of a major business deal, so I took 3 weeks off from my nursing job to help. I didn't mind. I would have taken 3 months if they'd needed it. Those early years with Michael were precious. Sarah worked part-time at an art gallery, and I became Michael's primary caregiver 3 days a week. I fed him, changed him, played with him, and watched him grow from a helpless infant into a curious toddler. His first word was Gamma, his attempt at grandma, and I cried tears of pure joy. I was there when he took his first steps, when he learned to ride his tricycle, when he started preschool. Robert used to joke that I loved Michael more than I'd loved our own children, but that wasn't true. It was just different. Grandparent love is pure in a way that parent love can't be because it's untainted by the daily struggles and discipline that raising a child requires. As Michael grew, so did my involvement in his life. When he was 7 and wanted to learn piano, Sarah mentioned it was expensive. The next day, I wrote a check for the entire first year of lessons. When he was 10 and desperate to go to soccer camp, I paid the registration fee before Sarah even asked. I wasn't trying to buy his love. I genuinely wanted to give him opportunities one hadn't been able to give my own children. Robert had passed away from a heart attack in 2012, leaving me with a modest life insurance policy and the house we'd paid off years earlier. I was comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable enough to help. I attended every piano recital, every soccer game, every school play. When Sarah and Gregory went on their annual 2-week vacation to Europe or the Caribbean, Michael stayed with me. We developed our own traditions. Friday night pizza and movie marathons. Saturday morning pancakes with chocolate chips. Sunday afternoon walks to the park where Robert and I used to take Sarah and David. Michael would tell me about school, about his friends, about his dreams of becoming an architect. I listened to every word, treasuring these moments, storing them in my memory like precious photographs. When Michael turned 16, Sarah called me with exciting news. He'd been accepted into a prestigious private school, Franklin Academy, known for sending its graduates to Ivy League universities. The tuition was $45,000 a year. She didn't ask directly, but the implication was clear. Gregory's business had hit some rough patches. Something about bad investments and market fluctuations I didn't fully understand. They couldn't afford it without help. I looked at my bank statements that night, calculating and recalculating. The life insurance money from Robert, my retirement savings, the small inheritance from my mother. I could do it. It would mean cutting back on things, maybe skipping my annual visit to see David and his family in Oregon, but I could do it. I called Sarah the next morning and told her I'd cover half the tuition if they could manage the other half. Her relief was palpable through the phone. Michael started at Franklin Academy that fall, and I was so proud I thought I might burst. For 3 years I wrote those checks twice a year. $22,500 every September and January. It wasn't easy. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital until I was working nearly full-time at an age when most of my friends were fully retired. I stopped going out to dinner with my book club. I wore the same winter coat for 5 years. I put off replacing the water heater when it started making concerning noises. But when I saw Michael thriving, making friends with children from influential families, getting straight A's, being recruited by college athletic programs for soccer, it all felt worth it. The signs were there, I suppose, though I didn't recognize them at the time. Michael's visits became less frequent during his high school years. He was busy, Sarah explained. Between schoolwork, soccer practice, SAT prep courses, and his social life, he barely had time to sleep. I understood. Teenagers needed their independence. But I missed our Friday night movies and Saturday morning pancakes. Sometimes I'd suggest he come over on a Sunday afternoon just for an hour or two, but he was always busy. Studying. Practice. A friend's party. I told myself this was normal, healthy even. He was growing up, preparing for his future. When Michael graduated from Franklin Academy in 2022, I was there in the audience, watching him receive his diploma and multiple academic awards. He waved at me afterward, gave me a quick hug, and then was off with his friends to some party. Sarah and Gregory had reserved a table at an expensive restaurant to celebrate, and I assumed I was included. When I mentioned it to Sarah, she looked uncomfortable. "Mom, it's really just immediate family," she said. "Gregory's parents, us, and Michael. It's already going to be a tight fit at the table." Immediate family. The word stung, but I pushed the feeling aside. I was being sensitive. Of course they wanted an intimate celebration. I went home alone and reheated leftovers, telling myself I was being silly for feeling hurt. Michael was accepted to Princeton University with a partial scholarship. Princeton. My grandson was going to Princeton. The pride I felt was overwhelming. The tuition, even with the scholarship, was still substantial. Sarah called me 3 weeks after Michael received his acceptance letter. They'd been looking at the numbers, she explained, and Gregory's business still hadn't fully recovered. Could I possibly help with the remaining tuition costs? This time I had to think harder. I was 70 years old, getting tired from the hospital shifts, and my savings had been depleted by the 3 years of private school tuition. But this was Princeton. This was Michael's future. I agreed to contribute $15,000 a year. It would require me to work until I was 75 at least, and I'd have to use some of the money I'd been saving for potential medical expenses or long-term care. But Michael was my grandson. Family came first. During Michael's freshman year at Princeton, I saw him exactly 3 times. Once at Thanksgiving, when he stopped by for 2 hours before heading to a friend's ski cabin in Vermont. Once at Christmas, when he came to the family dinner but spent most of the time on his phone. And once in March, when he needed someone to drive him to the airport at 4 in the morning because Sarah and Gregory had already left for a vacation and his car wouldn't start. Each time I told myself he was just busy. College was demanding. He was building his future. His sophomore year was worse. I saw him twice, both times for less than an hour. Our conversations, when they happened at all, were surface level. "How's school?" "Fine." "How's soccer?" "Good." "Do you have a girlfriend?" "Not really." I tried to extend the conversations, Ask him about his classes or his friends or his plans for the future, but his answers were brief, distracted. He was always checking his phone, always seeming eager to be somewhere else. I told myself this was normal. Young people were busy. They lived in a different world now with different priorities. But late at night, lying alone in the bed I'd once shared with Robert, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something precious, something I couldn't quite name. Then, in December 2024, Sarah called with news that changed everything. Michael was engaged. He'd met a girl named Charlotte Morrison at Princeton. She was from Connecticut. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels, and they were planning a June wedding. Sarah was ecstatic, talking a mile a minute about venues and guest lists and designer dresses. I was happy too, of course, though it stung a bit that this was the first I was hearing about Charlotte. Michael had never mentioned her in our brief conversations. "I'm so excited you'll be there, Mom," Sarah said. "It's going to be the social event of the season. Charlotte's family is handling most of it, but we'll need to contribute. Gregory's finally getting back on his feet financially, but a wedding like this, well, you understand." I understood. She was going to ask for money. Part of me wanted to say no, to explain that I'd given until I had nothing left to give. But this was Michael's wedding. My only grandson was getting married, and I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to sit in that church or venue or wherever they decided to hold it, and watch him promise to love someone for the rest of his life, the way Robert and I had promised each other 49 years ago. "How much do you need?" I asked. Sarah hesitated. "Well, we're trying to cover the rehearsal dinner. Charlotte's parents are handling the ceremony and reception, but traditionally, the groom's family covers the rehearsal. The Morrisons are used to a certain standard and we want to make a good impression. We're looking at about $30,000 for the dinner we want to host." $30,000. For one dinner. The number took my breath away. That was more than I'd made in a year when I first started nursing. That was 6 months of my current pension payments. That was impossible. "Sarah, honey, I don't have that kind of money readily available," I said carefully. "I've helped with Michael's education and I'm so glad I could do that, but $30,000, Mom, please," Sarah cut me off. "This is Michael's wedding. Don't you want to be part of it? Charlotte's family is going to think we're poor if we can't host a proper rehearsal dinner. Michael would be so embarrassed." The guilt hit me like a physical force. I was letting my grandson down. On one of the most important occasions of his life, I was saying no. After everything we'd been through together, after all those Friday nights and Saturday mornings and Sunday walks, I was putting money before family. I spent 3 days reviewing my finances with my accountant, Margaret Chen, who I'd been seeing for 20 years. Margaret was blunt in a way I appreciated. "Emily, you can do this, but it means liquidating your emergency fund," she said, looking at me over her reading glasses. "The fund you've been building to cover potential medical expenses or home repairs. If something goes wrong, if you need a new roof or if you have a health crisis, you'll have nothing to fall back on except your pension." "It's Michael's wedding," I said. Margaret sighed. "Emily, I've watched you give and give to that family. As your accountant and your friend, I have to ask, what have they given back to you? If you're hearing this story and you've experienced something similar with your own family, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone in feeling taken for granted, and there's strength in knowing others understand." The question haunted me, but I pushed it away. Margaret didn't understand. Family wasn't about transactions and balance sheets. It was about love, sacrifice, showing up when people needed you. I authorized her to liquidate the emergency fund. $30,000, transferred to Sarah and Gregory's account for Michael's rehearsal dinner. Sarah was effusive in her gratitude, calling me the best mother and grandmother anyone could ask for. Gregory sent a formal thank you note, the kind that felt like it had been written by someone who checked send thank you note off a to-do list, rather than by someone genuinely grateful. Michael sent a text. "Thanks, Grammy. You're the best. Grammy." He hadn't called me that since he was 6 years old. The wedding was set for June 14th, a Saturday. The save-the-date cards arrived in mid-January, elegant affairs with gold lettering on cream cardstock announcing the union of Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison and Michael Robert Martinez. Seeing Michael's full name, his middle name honoring Robert, made my heart ache with missing my husband. How I wished he could be there to see our grandson get married. I started planning immediately. I'd need a new dress, something appropriate for the grandmother of the groom, something elegant but not attention-seeking. I made an appointment at a boutique Margaret recommended and found a beautiful pale blue dress, the color of a summer sky. It cost more than I usually spent on clothes, but this was Michael's wedding. I was willing to splurge. My 73rd birthday fell on March 15th. I didn't expect a big celebration. Sarah and Gregory were busy with wedding planning, and Michael was finishing his junior year at Princeton. But on the morning of my birthday, the doorbell rang, and a delivery person handed me a beautifully wrapped package with a card attached. My heart lifted. They'd remembered. Despite everything, despite the distance and the busy schedules, my family had remembered my birthday. I carried the package inside, made myself a cup of coffee, and settled into Robert's old chair by the window to open it. The wrapping paper was expensive, silver with white ribbons. Inside was a small box, the kind that might hold jewelry. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. But instead of a necklace or bracelet, I found a folded piece of paper. Not a card. Just a plain piece of white paper folded in thirds. I unfolded it, confused. Michael's handwriting sprawled across the page in blue ink. Dear Grammy, happy birthday. I wanted to let you know that Charlotte and I have decided to keep the wedding party small and intimate. The rehearsal dinner will be limited to the immediate wedding party, parents, and Charlotte's immediate family. We think it's best if you skip the rehearsal and just come to the ceremony on Saturday. There will be too many people at the dinner, and we want to keep it manageable. Hope you understand. Love, Michael. P.S. The ceremony starts at 4 p.m. Don't be late. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. This was my birthday gift. A note telling me not to come to my grandson's rehearsal dinner. The dinner I'd paid for. The dinner that cost me my entire emergency fund, my safety net, my peace of mind about the future. Too many people. Keep it manageable. Just immediate wedding party, parents, and Charlotte's family. But I was family. I was his grandmother. I'd raised him when Sarah was too busy. I'd paid for his school. I'd been at every recital and game and play. I'd given him everything I had, literally everything, and now I was too many people. I wasn't immediate enough. The coffee I'd been drinking turned to acid in my stomach. I sat in that chair for 3 hours, the note clutched in my hand, unable to move or think or feel anything except a spreading numbness. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Michael loved me. Sarah loved me. They were just stressed about the wedding. The note was worded poorly. There was some misunderstanding. Finally, I called Sarah. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. Mom? Is everything okay? I'm at the florist. Sarah, I got Michael's birthday note, I said, keeping my voice steady. Is this real? Am I really not invited to the rehearsal dinner? Silence. Then, Mom, it's not that you're not invited. It's just that the Morrisons have very specific ideas about these things, and they think too many extended family members at the rehearsal makes it less intimate. You understand, right? You'll still be at the wedding. Extended family. That's what I was. Extended. Sarah, I paid for that dinner, I said quietly. $30,000. I liquidated my emergency fund. And we're so grateful, Mom. This is why we can host the dinner at all. But Charlotte's family is handling the guest list, and they want it kept to immediate family only. It's not personal. Not personal. How could it not be personal when I'd been told I was too extended, too much, too unnecessary to attend a dinner I'd funded? Did Michael even pick out this gift himself? I asked. Or did someone tell him to send me a note? Sarah's tone shifted, becoming defensive. Mom, Michael is very busy with school and wedding planning. I helped him coordinate birthday gifts for everyone. I thought you'd appreciate the heads up about the rehearsal so you didn't make plans. The heads up? That's what my birthday gift was. A heads up that I wasn't wanted. I see, I said. Thank you for clarifying. I hung up before Sarah could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I looked around my living room. At the photos covering the walls, dozens of them featuring Michael at every age. Michael as a baby in my arms. Michael at his first piano recital. Michael in his soccer uniform. Michael at his high school graduation. My entire life reduced to extended family. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's question. What have they given back to you? I'd been avoiding that question for years, pushing it down whenever it surfaced because asking it felt selfish. Family wasn't supposed to be about keeping score. But as I lay in the dark, I found myself tallying things up despite my best intentions. Money spent. Private school tuition for 3 years. Princeton contribution for 3 years so far. The rehearsal dinner. Countless smaller expenses over the years, birthday gifts, Christmas presents, that car repair when Sarah's vehicle broke down in 2018, the new laptop for Michael's freshman year, the furniture for Michael's dorm room. I'd never calculated it before, never wanted to, but now the numbers scrolled through my mind like a nightmare. Easily over $200,000. Maybe more. Time invested. Hundreds of hours of childcare. Thousands of hours attending events, helping with homework, providing emotional support. Years of putting Michael's needs before my own. What I'd received in return. Text messages. Brief visits. A note telling me I wasn't immediate enough to attend an event I'd funded. No, I couldn't think like this. This was wrong. Family was about more than transactions. But if it wasn't about transactions, why did I feel so used? Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe the Morrisons really did have strict requirements about the rehearsal. Maybe this was normal for high society weddings. Maybe I was being oversensitive because I was getting older and feeling lonely since Robert's death. But then Sarah called and asked if I could help pay for Michael's wedding suit. Charlotte wanted him in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo that cost $7,000. They'd already stretched their budget to the limit with other wedding expenses. Sarah, I gave you $30,000 for the rehearsal dinner 2 months ago, I said, exhausted. I don't have $7,000 for a suit. Mom, don't be like that. This is Michael's wedding. I'm not being like anything. I'm being broke. Do you understand? I'm 73 years old. I'm working part-time to make ends meet because I've given you everything I have. And now I'm being asked to pay for a $7,000 suit for a wedding where I'm apparently not immediate enough family to attend the rehearsal dinner I funded. You're still holding on to that? Sarah's voice rose in frustration. I explained the situation. Charlotte's family has certain expectations. And what about my expectations? I asked. What about expecting my daughter and grandson to treat me with basic respect? Respect? Mom, you're being ridiculous. We love you. We appreciate everything you do. But you can't expect us to restructure Michael's entire wedding around your hurt feelings. Your hurt feelings. As if my emotions were some irrational inconvenience rather than a reasonable response to being excluded and used. I need to go, I said, and hung up before she could respond. That conversation changed something fundamental inside me. I'd spent my entire adult life putting others first. My patients during my nursing career, my husband, my children, my grandson. I'd thought this was what love looked like. Sacrifice, selflessness, endlessly giving without asking for anything in return. But now, sitting alone in my living room with bills I couldn't quite pay and a wedding invitation that felt more like a summons than a celebration, I realized I'd confused love with being used. I spent the next week in a fog, going through the motions of daily life without really being present. I picked up my shifts at the hospital, grateful for the distraction of other people's problems. A young mother terrified about her son's surgery. An elderly man recovering from a stroke, determined to walk again. A teenager in a car accident, crying for her parents. Their problems were immediate, solvable in ways mine weren't. I could give them medications, comfort, practical help. But I couldn't fix the fundamental brokenness in my own family. My friend Louise from book club noticed I was struggling. We'd been meeting monthly for 15 years, discussing everything from contemporary fiction to true crime to gardening. Louise had lost her husband around the same time I'd lost Robert, and we'd bonded over our shared experience of widowhood. Emily, what's going on? She asked one afternoon after our March meeting, when everyone else had left. You've barely said 2 words today. I told her everything. The years of financial support, the private school tuition, the Princeton contribution, the rehearsal dinner funding, the birthday note. Her face grew increasingly concerned as I talked, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Emily, she finally said, I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. Your family is using you. They're not using me, I said automatically. They're just Going through a stressful time with the wedding. Honey, they've been just stressed for years. When is it enough? When do they start treating you like a person instead of an ATM? Her words struck me with the force of truth. That's exactly what I felt like. An ATM. Push the right buttons, say the right words, and money comes out. But ATMs don't have feelings. They don't need to be invited to rehearsal dinners. They don't need to be valued or respected or loved. They just need to dispense cash when required. I don't know what to do, I admitted. They're my family. Michael is my grandson. I love them. Love is supposed to go both ways, Louise said gently. What are they giving you besides stress and hurt feelings? There was that question again. I still didn't have a good answer. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and started researching narcissistic family dynamics, emotional manipulation, and financial abuse. The articles I found described patterns that felt uncomfortably familiar. Taking without giving. Guilt-tripping when boundaries were set. Treating family members as resources rather than people. Using intermittent reinforcement. Occasional kindness mixed with predominantly dismissive behavior. To keep someone invested in a relationship. I read until 2 in the morning, and by the time I closed the laptop I was crying. Not sad tears. Angry tears. Years of suppressed frustration and hurt and disappointment were finally surfacing, and I couldn't push them back down anymore. The next morning I called my attorney Richard Blackwell. Richard had handled Robert's estate after his death, and had helped me update my will several times over the years. Currently, everything I owned, my house, my remaining savings, my pension benefits, was designated to be split between Sarah and David, with a special trust set up for Michael's future children. Richard, I need to make some changes to my will, I said when he answered. We scheduled an appointment for the following week. In the meantime, I started making a list. Not a list of grievances, though I had plenty. A list of facts. Specific instances where I'd been dismissed, used, or treated as less than family. I needed to see it written out, needed to confirm that my feelings were based on reality rather than oversensitivity. The list grew longer than I'd expected. Michael's visits declining from weekly to monthly to barely at all over 5 years. No invitation to Michael's high school graduation dinner after paying 3 years of tuition. Forgotten birthdays, 2023, 2024, now 2025. Last-minute cancellations of planned visits, at least 15 instances in the past 3 years. Being asked for money or help but rarely being asked about my life, health, or well-being. The rehearsal dinner exclusion request. For additional money for wedding suit immediately after being told I'm not immediate family. Looking at the list made me feel simultaneously vindicated and heartbroken. This wasn't my imagination. This was a pattern of behavior spanning years. And I'd enabled it by never setting boundaries, never saying no, never requiring them to meet me halfway in our relationship. My appointment with Richard Blackwell was on a rainy Thursday afternoon. His office was in one of the old downtown buildings, the kind with tall ceilings and wooden panels that spoke of a different era. Richard was in his mid-60s, graying but sharp, and he'd always treated me with kindness. Emily, good to see you, he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. You mentioned wanting to make changes to your will? Yes, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I want to remove Sarah and Michael as beneficiaries. Richard's eyebrows rose. That's a significant change. May I ask what prompted this decision? I told him. Not everything, we'd have been there for hours, but enough. The pattern of treatment, the financial exploitation, the recent exclusion from the rehearsal dinner I'd funded. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Emily, I'm not going to talk you out of this if it's what you want. But I do need to make sure you're thinking clearly. Changing a will in response to a specific incident can sometimes be something people regret later. Have you considered simply reducing their inheritance rather than eliminating it entirely? I've done nothing but consider this for weeks, I said. And it's not about punishment. It's about reality. Sarah has Gregory's income and his family money. Michael is marrying into wealth. David, on the other hand, is a public school teacher with 3 children. He visits me twice a year even though he lives across the country. He calls every week just to talk. He's never asked me for money. If anyone deserves to inherit what little I have, it's him. Richard nodded slowly. What about Michael? I know you set up that educational trust. I want that dissolved. The money that's left should go to David's children's education instead. All right. Let me draft something for you to review. This will take a few days. In the meantime, I want you to think about whether you want to inform Sarah and Michael about these changes. That question haunted me over the next few days. Part of me wanted to tell them, wanted to see their faces when they realized there were consequences for treating people as disposable. But another part, the part that still ached with love for the little boy who used to call me Gamma and hold my hand during park walks, couldn't bear the confrontation. I decided to wait. The wedding was 3 months away. I'd see how things unfolded. Maybe something would change. Maybe Michael would realize how hurtful the rehearsal exclusion was and apologize. Maybe Sarah would recognize that she'd been taking advantage of my generosity. Maybe I'd feel differently after some time had passed. But as April turned into May, nothing changed. I received no calls from Michael, no apologies from Sarah. The wedding invitation arrived. Formal, elegant, expensive-looking. Emily Hartford, it read, was cordially invited to the wedding ceremony of Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison and Michael Robert Martinez. Ceremony at 4 p.m., reception to follow. Black tie optional. No +1 indicated. Not that I had anyone to bring. The invitation said nothing about the rehearsal dinner, confirming my exclusion. I hung it on my refrigerator and stared at it every morning over coffee, trying to decide what to do. Louise thought I shouldn't go. Why would you attend a wedding where you're clearly not valued? She asked. Send a card and spend that Saturday doing something for yourself. Margaret, my accountant, agreed. Emily, you've given them everything. You don't owe them your presents too. But David, when I called to talk through the situation, offered a different perspective. Mom, I understand you're hurt. God knows Sarah has always been difficult. But Michael is still young. He's probably being influenced by Charlotte's family and their expectations. If you don't go to the wedding, you might regret it later. There's no taking that back. David's words resonated. He was right that Michael was young. Only 21, still figuring out who he was and what he valued. But he was also old enough to know better than to exclude his grandmother from a dinner she'd funded. Old enough to pick up the phone and call rather than sending terse text messages. Old enough to recognize that love requires effort, not just extraction. In mid-May, Sarah called. Not to apologize or check on how I was doing. To ask if I'd bought my dress for the wedding yet and to inform me that Charlotte wanted all the grandparents to wear neutral colors, beiges, tans, creams, to coordinate with the wedding's aesthetic vision. I already bought a dress, I said. It's blue. Oh. Sarah's disappointment was audible. Well, maybe you could return it? Charlotte has been very specific about the color palette. She wants the ceremony photos to be cohesive. Sarah, I'm 73 years old. I'm not changing my dress to match someone else's Instagram aesthetic. Mom, why are you being so difficult about everything? First the rehearsal dinner, now this. It's like you're trying to make this wedding harder for everyone. The injustice of that statement took my breath away. I was being difficult. I'd paid for their rehearsal dinner, contributed to Michael's education for years, and been excluded from family events, but I was the difficult one? Sarah, I'm going to hang up now before I say something I might regret, I said, and disconnected the call. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. For a moment I wondered if I was having a heart attack, but then I realized it was a panic attack, the first I'd had since Robert died. The stress was literally making me sick. That evening I called Richard Blackwell. The will changes we discussed. I want to move forward with all of them. You're certain? He asked. I'm certain. 3 days later, I sat in his office and signed the new documents. The house would go to David. My remaining savings would be split between David and a charitable donation to the hospital where I'd worked for 37 years. The educational trust originally meant for Michael's future children was dissolved, with the funds redirected to David's 3 children for their college expenses. Sarah and Michael would receive nothing. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I'd already given them everything I had. There was nothing left to give except my house and savings, and those needed to go somewhere they'd be valued. As I signed each page, I felt a strange combination of grief and relief. Grief for the family relationship I thought I had. Relief for finally taking action to protect myself. Richard notarized the documents and placed them in his safe. "Emily," he said as I prepared to leave, "I'm proud of you. I've seen too many elderly clients exploited by their families. Setting boundaries, even this late, takes courage." His words meant more than he probably knew. I'd spent so much of my life being the caregiver, the supporter, the one who made everything okay for everyone else. Being told I was brave for finally prioritizing my own well-being felt revolutionary. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I still hadn't decided whether to attend. The blue dress hung in my closet, tags removed, a symbol of my defiance or maybe just my stubbornness. Every time I looked at it, I felt a complicated tangle of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Then 2 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. My heart leapt despite everything. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he'd realized how he'd treated me. Maybe things could still be repaired. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Hey, Grammy. How are you?" The casual warmth in his voice, the use of my old nickname, made tears spring to my eyes. This was the Michael I remembered, the one who'd loved me before college and Charlotte and social expectations got in the way. "I'm well, sweetheart. How are you? How's wedding planning?" "Crazy busy but good. Listen, I'm calling because Charlotte and I have been thinking, and we'd love it if you could contribute to the honeymoon fund. We're planning 2 weeks in Italy, and it's a bit more expensive than we initially budgeted for. A few $1,000s would really help us out." The request hit me like cold water. He wasn't calling to apologize or reconnect. He was calling to ask for more money. After excluding me, ignoring me, treating me as extended family, he wanted me to fund his Italian honeymoon. "Michael," I said slowly, "I've given you and your parents over $200,000 over the years. I don't have a few $1,000s for a honeymoon fund. Come on, Grammy. Don't be like that. You've always helped me out. This is my honeymoon. It's important. Don't be like that." The same dismissive phrase Sarah had used. As if my financial limitations and emotional hurt were just me being difficult, just me being like that. "Michael, when is the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for money or inform me of something, but just to talk." Silence. Then, "I've been really busy with school and the wedding." "You've been busy for 3 years. You've been too busy to visit, too busy to call, too busy for our Friday movie nights or Saturday pancakes. But you're not too busy to ask for money." "Wow, okay." His voice turned cold. "I thought you'd want to contribute to my honeymoon, but I guess I was wrong. Sorry for bothering you." "Michael, wait." But he'd already hung up. I stared at my phone, emotions warring inside me. Part of me wanted to call him back, apologize, agree to send money just to repair the connection. But a stronger part knew that this was exactly the pattern I needed to break. Every time I prioritized their wants over my own well-being, I reinforced the dynamic where I was valuable only for what I could provide. That night I made my decision. I would not attend the wedding. Showing up after being repeatedly dismissed and used would send a message that their behavior was acceptable. It would tell them that no matter how badly they treated me, I'd always be there, always available, always ready to give more. Instead, I would send a gift and a letter. The gift would be modest but thoughtful. The letter would explain, calmly and clearly, why I couldn't attend and what needed to change if we were going to have a relationship moving forward. I spent the next week drafting the letter, writing and rewriting until I found the right words. Not angry, not vindictive, but honest. "Dear Michael, I've decided not to attend your wedding. This decision has not been easy, but it's necessary for my well-being. Over the past years, I've contributed over $200,000 to your education and your wedding. I've done this out of love, believing that family supports each other. However, I've come to realize that the support has been one-sided. In 3 years, you've visited me fewer than 10 times. You've stopped calling except when you need something. When I helped fund your rehearsal dinner, liquidating my emergency savings to do so, I was told I wasn't immediate enough family to actually attend that dinner. Most recently, you called to ask for honeymoon money and hung up on me when I tried to discuss the pattern in our relationship. Michael, I love you. I always will. But I can't continue to be treated as a resource, rather than as a person who deserves respect and consideration. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be based on mutual care, not just on what I can provide financially. I wish you and Charlotte happiness in your marriage. I hope you build a life filled with love and respect, the kind of respect I wish you'd shown me. With love, Grandma Emily. I paired the letter with a practical gift. A set of quality kitchen knives, the kind every young couple needs. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that would drain what little I had left. The day before the wedding, I mailed the package with the letter and gift. Then I turned off my phone, knowing the response would likely be angry calls from Sarah. I didn't want to deal with that. Not yet. That Saturday, June 14th, while Michael married Charlotte at what I imagined was a beautiful ceremony, I spent the day at a spa with Louise. We got massages, facials, and manicures. We had a leisurely lunch. We talked about books and gardening and travel plans and everything except weddings and ungrateful families. How are you feeling? Louise asked me over dessert. Sad, I admitted. But also free? Is that terrible? I'm missing my grandson's wedding, and part of me feels free. It's not terrible. It's honest. You've been carrying the weight of that relationship alone for years. Putting it down feels like freedom because it is. When I turned my phone back on Sunday morning, I had 23 missed calls. 15 from Sarah, 6 from Gregory, 2 from David, who'd apparently been pulled into the drama. There were dozens of text messages, progressing from confused to angry to accusatory. Sarah's text started relatively calm. Mom, where are you? Michael says you sent a letter saying you're not coming. Then escalated. I can't believe you're doing this. On his wedding day. How selfish can you be? And finally, you've ruined everything. Michael is devastated. Charlotte's family thinks we're trash. I hope you're happy. Gregory's messages were more formal but equally angry. Emily, this behavior is unacceptable. After everything Sarah and I have done to include you in Michael's life, this is how you repay us? By embarrassing us in front of Charlotte's family. David's messages were different. Mom, Sarah's freaking out. Call me when you can. Want to make sure you're okay. Call David first. He answered immediately. Mom, what happened? I told him everything. The whole story start to finish. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I wish you'd talked to me sooner, he finally said. I knew Sarah was self-centered, but I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. You did the right thing, Mom. You shouldn't have to pay people to treat you with basic respect. His validation made me cry. After weeks of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I was overreacting or being too sensitive, having David confirm that I'd made the right choice felt like absolution. Sarah's going to keep calling, he warned. She's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown and ruined Michael's wedding. Let her tell people whatever she needs to, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. The people who matter will ask for my side of the story. Over the next week, several people did ask. My friend Louise knew the truth already. Margaret had watched the financial exploitation happen in real time. My book club rallied around me when Sarah called one of the members trying to get them to convince me to apologize. Sarah called me directly exactly once. I answered, knowing we needed to have this conversation eventually. Mom, how could you? She didn't even say hello. Do you understand what you've done? Charlotte's parents think we're some kind of dysfunctional family. Michael is heartbroken. The wedding photos have this huge gap where you should have been in the family portraits. Sarah, did you read my letter? I asked quietly. Of course I read your letter. It was full of selfish complaints about money. After everything you've done. I interrupted. Sarah, tell me one thing you've done for me in the past 5 years. One thing that wasn't about asking for money, or telling me what I should do to make your life easier. Silence. I've given you and Michael over $200,000, I continued. I've been excluded from family events, forgotten on birthdays, treated as an afterthought unless money was needed. I paid for Michael's rehearsal dinner, and was told I wasn't immediate enough family to attend. And when I tried to set a boundary, Michael hung up on me and you called me selfish. So this is about money. Sarah's voice was cold. Everything we've meant to each other. Reduced to dollars and cents. No, Sarah. This is about respect. About being treated like a person instead of an ATM. About recognizing that relationships require effort from both sides. If this is how you feel, then maybe we shouldn't have a relationship at all. The threat hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to back down, to apologize, to do anything to avoid losing my daughter and grandson completely. But I'd spent too many years prioritizing their feelings over mine. If that's your choice, I'll respect it, I said. But know that I love you, and if you ever want a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial support, I'm here. Sarah hung up without responding. The silence that followed was deafening. No calls from Michael. No texts from Sarah. It was as if I'd never existed in their lives at all, now that I was no longer useful. The rejection hurt more than I'd expected. A physical ache in my chest that made simple tasks feel overwhelming. But gradually I began to build a new life. A life that wasn't centered around Sarah and Michael's needs and demands. I spent more time with my book club. I took a watercolor painting class I'd been putting off for years because I was too busy working to afford their expenses. I video chatted with David and his family twice a week, getting to know my other grandchildren in a way I'd never prioritized before because I was so focused on Michael. David's children, Emma, 12, Sophie, 9, and Jack, 7, were delightful. Emma was a bookworm who loved discussing the novels we were both reading. Sophie was an aspiring scientist who wanted to video chat so she could show me her latest experiments. Jack was obsessed with dinosaurs and would talk for hours about paleontology if you let him. I'd sent them birthday cards and Christmas gifts over the years, but I'd never really invested time in building relationships with them. Now, freed from the constant demands of Sarah and Michael, I could. The kids ask about you constantly, David told me in August. They want to know when you're coming to visit. I'm thinking maybe October, I said. I'd love to see the fall colors in Oregon. The spare room is always ready for you, Mom. Stay as long as you want. His easy generosity, his unconditional welcome, highlighted everything that had been missing in my relationship with Sarah. David had never asked me for money, never made me feel like my value was contingent on what I could provide. He just loved me, the way family was supposed to love. In September, 3 months after the wedding, I received a letter. Not from Sarah or Michael, but from Charlotte's mother, Victoria Morrison. I stared at the elegant envelope, postmarked from Connecticut, and debated whether to open it. What could she possibly have to say to me? Curiosity won out. I opened the letter carefully, unfolding thick cream stationery covered in precise handwriting. Dear Mrs. Hartford, you don't know me, but I feel compelled to write to you. I am Charlotte's mother, and I recently learned the full story of your exclusion from the rehearsal dinner. I want you to know that when Gregory approached us about having a smaller, more intimate rehearsal, he specifically told us you were unable to attend due to health issues. We had no idea you'd funded the dinner or that you were actively excluded. Had we known, Charlotte and I would have insisted you be included. Furthermore, I've since learned from Charlotte that Michael has repeatedly asked you for money throughout his time at Princeton, and that you've contributed substantially to his education. Charlotte was unaware of this as well, as Michael led her to believe his education was funded entirely through scholarships and his parents' savings. Mrs. Hartford, I believe in honesty and integrity. The deception your family engaged in, particularly regarding the rehearsal dinner, troubles me deeply. While I cannot undo what's been done, I wanted you to know that not everyone in Michael's new family finds this behavior acceptable. I hope you are well, and that you've surrounded yourself with people who value you appropriately. With respect, Victoria Morrison. I read the letter 3 times, emotions flooding through me. Victoria Morrison, someone I'd never met, had shown me more consideration and respect in one letter than my own daughter had shown me in years. The validation felt profound. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Even an outsider could see that my treatment had been unacceptable. But the letter also revealed something troubling. Michael had lied to Charlotte and her family. He'd hidden the extent of my financial support, lied about why I wasn't at the rehearsal dinner, constructed a narrative where he was the independent, self-made young man rather than someone whose grandmother had sacrificed her financial security for his opportunities. I wrote back to Victoria, thanking her for her honesty and kindness. I didn't elaborate on the situation, she'd clearly figured out enough, but I appreciated her reaching out. Her letter was a gift I hadn't known I needed. Confirmation that I deserved better. October came, and I flew to Oregon to visit David and his family. The week I spent there was transformative. David's wife, Jennifer, welcomed me with genuine warmth. The children were excited to have Grandma visiting, planning activities and wanting to spend time with me. We went apple picking, visited a pumpkin patch, had family game nights, and cooked together. It was everything I'd imagined family should be. Reciprocal, joyful, based on genuine connection rather than transaction. "Mom, you seem different," David said one evening after the kids were in bed. We were sitting on his back porch, watching the sunset and sipping tea. "Different how?" "Lighter," he said. "Happier. Like a weight's been lifted." "It has been," I admitted. "I spent so many years trying to earn love from people who saw me as a resource. Being here with you and your family where I'm just wanted for who I am. It's healing." "You're always wanted here, Mom. Always." When I returned home to California, I felt renewed. My house felt less empty. My days felt more purposeful. I was working less, saving more carefully, building the emergency fund that I depleted for Michael's rehearsal dinner. Margaret helped me create a budget that would rebuild my financial security over time. In December, as Christmas approached, I sent cards and gifts to David's family. I sent nothing to Sarah or Michael. It felt strange, breaking a tradition I'd maintained for decades. But I'd learned that traditions based on obligation couldn't last anymore. I needed to honor myself, even if it meant disappointing people I once loved. December was quiet. Sarah didn't call. Michael didn't text. Part of me wondered if they'd moved on completely, if I'd been so thoroughly excised from their lives that I barely warranted a thought. The holidays were hardest. Those moments when old traditions echoed with absence. But on Christmas Eve something shifted. Louise invited me to her family's celebration, and I discovered a new kind of Christmas magic. Her grandchildren treated me like an honorary grandmother, asking me stories about my nursing days, wanting to sit beside me during dinner. I realized I didn't need to be Michael's grandmother to experience the joy of grandparent-grandchild connection. David's kids provided that. Louise's family welcomed that. The love I had to give was still valuable. It just had to go somewhere it was truly received. By January 2025, almost a year after that devastating birthday note, I'd built something I didn't know I was missing. A life that belonged to me. My house was finally getting repairs it needed. I hired a contractor to fix the leaky roof, replace aging windows, and renovate the bathroom. Watching these improvements happen felt revolutionary. For years, I'd postponed maintenance because I was saving money to give away. Now I was finally taking care of my own home, my own future. Margaret and I met quarterly to review my finances, and with each meeting I felt more secure. The emergency fund was slowly rebuilding. My pension went further when I wasn't constantly being asked for contributions. I could breathe again. Then, on a Wednesday in late January, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Grandma Emily?" A young woman's voice, unfamiliar but with an undertone of something nervous. "This is Charlotte, Michael's wife. I hope you don't mind me calling." My heart jumped into my throat. "Hello, Charlotte. How did you get this number?" "From your letter. The one you mailed to Michael after the wedding. He threw it away, but I fished it out of the trash and kept it. I've been thinking about calling you for months." I didn't know what to say. Michael had thrown away my letter without even reading it? Or had he read it and then thrown it away? Either way, the image hurt. "What did you want to talk about?" I asked carefully. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. Mrs. Hartford, or can I call you Emily? I didn't know about any of this. About your exclusion from the rehearsal dinner, about you funding it, about the financial support you've given Michael throughout his life. How did you find out?" "My mother told me. She confronted Michael about what your letter said, and it all came out." Michael admitted he and his mother had deliberately misled us about certain things. He told us his education was mostly scholarship funded, and that you had health issues preventing you from attending the rehearsal. Neither was true. The admission stung despite myself. Michael had lied, and then he'd kept lying when confronted. "Charlotte, why are you calling me? Michael is your husband. You should probably be protecting his reputation, not calling his grandmother to apologize for him. Because what he did, what his family did, was wrong. And my mother raised me to believe that integrity matters. I don't want to be part of a marriage built on deception and taking advantage of people who love us." There was something genuine in her voice, something that reminded me that Charlotte wasn't the villain in this story. She'd been a pawn just as I had been, though in a different way. "How is Michael?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "He's struggling, honestly. When everything came out, when he realized you were serious about not maintaining a relationship, it shook him. He's been different since the wedding. Quieter. Sometimes I catch him looking sad when he doesn't think I'm watching. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied by that. He'd hurt me. It was poetic justice that he was hurting now. But the part of me that still carried a grandmother's love for the little boy, who used to call me Gamma, ached with sympathy. "Tell him I hope he's well," I said finally. "And Charlotte, thank you for calling. For being honest. For caring about integrity. The world needs more people like that. Emily, I don't know if this helps, but I want you to know that I've insisted to Michael that we need to rebuild your relationship. That I won't be part of a family that mistreats people the way you were mistreated. If you're ever willing to talk to him, I think he'd like to apologize." After Charlotte hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap for a long time. The olive branch she was offering was tempting. A piece of me wanted to accept it immediately, wanted to believe that Michael had learned his lesson, and would somehow transform into the grandson I'd always wanted him to be. But another part, the part I'd cultivated over the past year, knew that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting the damage that had been done. I needed time. Real time, not rushed reconciliation that would simply re-establish the old patterns. I didn't call Michael, but I did text Charlotte back the next day. "Tell him I'm willing to talk when he's ready to have an honest conversation. No excuses, no justifications. Just honesty." Weeks passed. No response from Michael. I'd prepared myself for that possibility, had accepted that he might not be ready to face what he'd done. But every time my phone buzzed, there was a small flutter of hope that maybe today would be the day he reached out. In March, Richard Blackwell called me with an unexpected question. "Emily, have you considered changing your will again?" I was surprised by how much the question hurt. Had I made a mistake? Was I being too hard on Michael and Sarah? "Why do you ask?" I said carefully. "Because you seemed certain when you made those changes, but a year has passed. People sometimes soften over time. I want to make sure you're still comfortable with your decisions." "I'm comfortable," I said, and realized it was true. Comfortable doesn't mean happy about the situation, Richard. It means I've made peace with my choices. That's all I needed to know. April brought spring, and with it an unexpected letter. Handwritten in Michael's careful script. I recognized his handwriting immediately. He'd written it on so many piano lesson permission slips and school forms years ago. "Dear Grandma Emily, I don't know where to start, so I'm just going to start. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for how I excluded you, for how I used you, for the note about the rehearsal dinner, for hanging up on you about the honeymoon, for everything. Charlotte's mother confronted me about your letter, and for the first time I actually read it. I realized I'd thrown it away without reading it the first time, which somehow makes everything worse. I'd already decided in my mind that you were being unreasonable, so I didn't even give your words a chance. But when I read your letter, I cried. I actually sat in my apartment and cried like I was a kid again, because I realized what I'd done. I realized that you'd given me everything, not just money, though that too, but time, love, presence, and I'd paid you back with dismissal and ingratitude. I've spent the past months thinking about all the things I took for granted. The Friday movie nights, the Saturday pancakes, the way you'd drop everything if I needed anything. The way you looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. I threw that away because I was selfish and ungrateful, and caught up in a world where people like Charlotte's family set the standards for what mattered. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I needed you to know that I see what I did now. I see how badly I hurt you. And I'm so sorry. If you ever want to see me again, I'd like that. Not because I want money. Not because I need anything. Just because I want my grandmother back in my life, and I want to be the kind of grandson you deserve." Charlotte encouraged me to write this letter. She's been incredible through all of this, insisting that character matters and that I need to face what I've done and try to make it right. I don't know why she bothers with me sometimes, but I'm grateful she does. I love you, Grandma. I always have, even when I was too stupid and selfish to act like it. Your grandson, Michael. I read that letter 7 times before I could even breathe properly. My hands shook. Tears streamed down my face. The letter didn't undo the past year. It didn't give me back my emergency fund or restore my financial security. It didn't erase the hurt or the rejection or the feeling of being used. But it was honest. It was real. Michael had finally, actually seen what he'd done and taken responsibility for it. No excuses, no justifications. Just acknowledgement and apology and a glimmer of the person I'd always hoped he could become. I sat with the letter for 3 days before responding. I needed to be sure my answer came from my authentic self, not from the old Emily who would do anything to repair a broken relationship, and not from the angry Emily who wanted punishment and vindication. On the 4th day I wrote back, "Dear Michael, thank you for your letter. It took courage to write it, and I want you to know that I recognize and appreciate that. I'm not going to pretend that this letter erases the past year or fixes everything between us. What happened still hurts. Your exclusion, your deception, your treatment of me, those things matter and have consequences. But I also see that you're trying to understand what you did and why it was wrong. That matters too. I'm willing to rebuild our relationship, but it has to be different than it was before. It can't be based on what I can give you financially. It has to be based on genuine connection, mutual respect, and your willingness to show up. Not just when you need something, but because you actually want to spend time with your grandmother. I'd like to have coffee with you sometime soon. In person where we can talk face to face. No one else, just you and me. We need to have a real conversation about what happened and what our relationship can look like going forward. I love you, Michael. I always have. I'm glad you're finally remembering that love requires more than just extraction. Your grandmother, Emily." Michael called the next day to arrange the coffee meeting. We agreed on a neutral location. A small cafe halfway between his apartment in the city and my house. 2 weeks away, enough time for both of us to prepare emotionally. I'll be honest, I was terrified. Terrified he'd disappoint me again. Terrified I'd fall back into old patterns of giving and enabling. Terrified that my attempt to set boundaries would crumble when I saw his face. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in over a year when it came to Michael: hope. Real tentative hope that maybe he could become the person I'd always believed he could be. 2 weeks later, I sat in that cafe nursing a cappuccino, watching the door. When Michael walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd grown a beard, gotten taller somehow, or maybe just carried himself differently. He looked more like a man than a college student. He looked worried. When he saw me, his face crumpled. For a second, I thought he might cry right there in the cafe. "Hi, Grandma," he said, sitting across from me carefully, as if I might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Hello, Michael." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he reached across the table and I took his hand. His hand was warm and solid, and I realized how much I'd missed physical contact with him. "I don't even know where to start," he said. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I'm so incredibly sorry." "I know," I said gently. "And I believe you. But I need to understand something. Why? Why did you treat me the way you did? Why the note about the rehearsal? Why lie to Charlotte's family?" Michael took a shaky breath. "Because I was embarrassed. I was this guy with a grandmother who was essentially funding my life, and I didn't want Charlotte's family to know that. You know how they are. Wealthy, prestigious, successful by their own merits supposedly. And here I was, getting handed everything by my family, and I didn't want them to see me as ungrateful or dependent. So you lied about me." "Yeah. And I cut you out because it was easier than confronting the reality of how much you'd done for me. If I didn't spend time with you, I didn't have to feel guilty. If I didn't think about how much you'd given up, I could pretend I was this self-made guy getting opportunities through merit and luck rather than through my grandmother's sacrifice. It was honest, painfully so. And it made sense in a way that didn't absolve him but did help me understand the psychology behind his behavior." "Michael, can I tell you something?" I said. "I don't care if Charlotte's family knows you had help. I don't care if the world knows. You know what I care about? That you know. That you recognize the sacrifice and value it. That you show gratitude through your behavior and effort, not just through words. I know that now. I think I always knew it, but I was too immature to face it." We talked for hours. Michael asked about my past year, about how I'd been doing, about my new life without him and Sarah in it. I told him about David's visits, about the painting classes, about rebuilding my financial security. I told him about Charlotte's letter and how much it meant. I'm really lucky she called you, Michael admitted. If she hadn't, I think I would have just buried this. Pretended you were being unreasonable and moved on. But she didn't let me do that. She made me face it. You married a good woman, I said. Don't let her down the way you've let people down before. I won't. I'm trying not to. Every day I'm trying to be better. Before we left the cafe, Michael asked me the question I'd been waiting for. Can we rebuild this, Grandma? Can we go back to how we were? We can't go back, I said firmly. We can only go forward. Forward means boundaries. Forward means you showing up consistently, not just when you need something. Forward means no more deception or lies. Can you do that? Yes, he said. I want to try. I want to earn back your trust. Then we'll try together. We didn't return to the old dynamics immediately. Over the summer, Michael visited me twice, and we had coffee once a month. He came for Sunday dinner at my house, and we worked through the garden together, him asking questions about the plants I'd been nurturing. He called on my birthday, my 74th. Not to give me a gift or ask for something, but just to tell me he loved me. Slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding. It wasn't the same as before. It was harder and more intentional. But it was real in a way the old relationship never had been, because now both of us knew the cost of taking each other for granted. In August, Michael asked if he could introduce me to Charlotte properly. Not as the grandmother who'd funded her wedding rehearsal dinner, but as his grandmother, the woman who'd raised him and shaped who he was. Over dinner at my house, I got to know my grandson's wife, not as an outsider excluded from family events, but as someone welcome at our table. I owe you an apology, I said to her directly. For what? Charlotte looked confused. For not reaching out sooner after your wedding. For making assumptions about you based on limited information. For not recognizing how kind you were being in reaching out to me. Mrs. Hartford, Emily, you don't owe me anything. I just did what felt right. Well, thank you. For caring about integrity, and for loving my grandson enough to push him to be better. Sarah remained distant throughout all of this. Michael mentioned once that he'd tried to talk to her about what he'd done and his efforts to rebuild our relationship, but she'd become defensive. She'd told him it was his choice if he wanted to maintain contact with me, but that she wouldn't be participating in any reconciliation. The bridge between Sarah and me had burned too thoroughly, I think. Maybe someday it could be rebuilt, but not yet. Perhaps not ever. But I'd made peace with that. Sarah had made her choice and I'd made mine. We were moving forward on separate paths, and while that was sad, it wasn't devastating the way it would have been a year ago. By the time my 75th birthday rolled around, marked now with a quiet dinner with David's family via video call, and a small gathering with Louise and my book club friends, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer defined by what I gave to others. I was defined by who I was when I was alone, and that person I was learning was pretty wonderful. The money I'd given to Michael and Sarah was gone, spent on their educations and celebrations. I couldn't get that back and I'd made peace with that too. But I had something more valuable than that money now, time. Time to read the books I wanted to read. Time to paint. Time to spend with people who genuinely wanted me around. Time to be not just a grandmother or a mother, but Emily. A person with her own dreams, her own value, her own worth independent of what I could provide. Richard Blackwell called in September to confirm that my will changes remained as I wanted them. They did. David would inherit my house and the bulk of my savings. Michael was excluded, though not because I didn't love him anymore, but because loving someone didn't mean financial obligation. Michael was learning that now, learning to build his own life and make his own decisions without expecting his grandmother to foot the bill. One evening in October, as the California sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and reflected on the past 18 months. The birthday note that had seemed so devastating when I first received it had become a catalyst for change. Not just change in my external circumstances, though that had happened too, but change in how I saw myself. I'd learned that being a grandmother didn't require sacrificing my own security. I'd learned that love without boundaries wasn't love. It was codependency. I'd learned that setting consequences for bad behavior wasn't cruel. It was necessary. I'd learned that I deserved to be respected, valued, and appreciated. Not for what I could give, but for who I was. Most importantly, I'd learned that it was never too late to rewrite your story. I'd spent decades as the giver, the sacrificer, the one who made everything okay for everyone else. I thought that was what love looked like. But at 75 years old, I'd finally discovered that love was also boundaries. Love was also self-protection. Love was also saying no and meaning it. The will changes I'd made, removing Sarah and Michael as primary beneficiaries and redirecting that inheritance to David, had felt shocking at the time. But now they felt like the most honest decision I'd ever made. They were a statement about value and respect and what I believed I deserved. Michael was still building his relationship with me, learning to be the grandson I'd always wanted him to be. It was still imperfect, still required patience and grace on both sides. But it was genuine, built on a foundation of truth rather than expectation. Sarah had reached out once in September, a brief message saying that she and Gregory had sold their Brookhaven house and were downsizing. The message was informational, not apologetic. I responded politely but briefly, leaving the door open but not making myself available in the way I once would have. My life at 75 was simpler than it had been at 60, but it was richer. I had fewer people in it, but the ones who remained were there by choice, not obligation. I had less money, but greater peace knowing I wasn't spending my security to purchase love. I had quieter days, but they were filled with meaning rather than crisis management. Sometimes, usually in the evenings when the light was fading and I was alone with my thoughts, I wondered if there was a way I could have handled this differently. A way where I could have had healthy relationships with Sarah and Michael without setting such dramatic boundaries. A way where I could have helped them without losing myself in the process. But I didn't stay in that wondering place for long because the truth was, I'd done the best I could with the tools I had at the time. I'd loved them as deeply as I knew how, given them as much as I could spare and then some. When that love was taken for granted and exploited, I'd finally found the courage to protect myself. That wasn't failure. That was growth. The note in my birthday gift, "Don't come to the rehearsal," had seemed like an ending. Now I understood it had been a beginning. The beginning of a new chapter where Emily Hartford finally put herself first. The beginning of a life where love didn't mean sacrificing everything. The beginning of discovering that you can rewrite your will, yes, but more importantly, you can rewrite your life. And at 75, with the best years potentially still ahead of me, that rewrite felt like the greatest gift I could give myself.